Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about the underlying connections and root causes which shape our lives through various ideas and current events. As we discuss and debate today, maybe disagree, maybe agree, we'll see.
Yeah.
We hope you'll be challenged to think again and then really to engage with wisdom in our increasingly hostile and hurting culture. Today, we're going to talk about God's first family. We're going to talk a little bit about Christian ears. How do we hear the news and think about the nation? And then we're going to do a little bit of reaction to Claudine Gray and Harvard University. How are you doing today, Luke?
I'm doing well.
I'm doing well also.
I feel like the year's off to a good start. We had our first week of school this week.
Oh, yeah, you started back.
Yeah, the snow's starting to fall in the mountains. It's a
Kids
little late
had 2
this
weeks
year.
off? Oh, no, you have a long break.
No, we do 4 weeks off.
Yeah, right.
So we do 9 weeks on, 4 weeks off.
They
all
rusty when
year
they come
round.
back?
No, it's actually the whole point. So like if you take a long summer,
different rhythm.
if you take a long summer, by the end they've lost a ton. 4 weeks is this like sweet
But
spot.
even Melissa, who's teaching elementary school with 2 weeks off Christmas, she sees it the first day especially.
Well, they forget how to like go to bed on time.
That's all of that. And they're
Yeah.
cranky. They argue with each other more. They forget how to even get along.
A friend of mine's a middle school teacher. I asked him how it's going last night, public school. He said the kids don't go to bed. They're up till 3.
Yeah.
Because they've been gaming with their
Yeah,
friends all
yeah,
night
yeah.
for 2 weeks straight.
Yeah. Okay, Claudine Gay resigns from Harvard.
Yep.
What was your initial reaction to that? And did you have a different reaction after a little bit of reflection?
Well, I'm just tired of the Republicans pouncing. No, I'm just kidding. You did. I saw a thing saying the Republicans now are leveraging plagiarism, and I was like, the only places that plagiarism matters are academia, and like, well, I don't know, academia.
Well, she didn't put
Journalism.
plagiarism as a reason for resigning.
Yeah, but that was the only reason that mattered. But what's
I
interesting
don't
is
think so. I think that was the second reason, the one that could
was
be
the lever.
pointed to. The
Yeah.
lever, that's right.
it was the
Or lever, yeah.
anti-Semitism and
You
or
say
the,
lever? I say lever.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, yeah, I think the anti-Semitism was the first thing, but then the plagiarism was where they could force, like you said, lever,
Force the issue. Yeah, because the other two, weren't there 3 Ivy League presidents,
Yes, UPenn, MIT, and Harvard.
and the 2 white women had to resign immediately because of the
They
anti-Semitism.
forced them out.
But the black woman, it took a little more.
In the black one, 1,500 faculty wrote letters in support and said, we don't want her to resign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So your first thought, not the right leaning on it. What was your first thought, sincerely?
well, I just figured the clock was ticking. To me, it felt like, oh, it's just
But
a matter
not
of time.
at first. Did you think that? Did you think
I
that
did.
right off the beginning that she's going to go eventually, or
Yeah.
do you think?
Well, no, once I
because-
saw the plagiarism claims,
Yes.
like I read through, it was Christopher Rufo, I think, broke that story, and it was just like, oh,
And then
it's done.
You know, you have to admit, I think you would agree with me, the internet, it enables people that are not journalists to put things out, do work, they're volunteering their time,
Yeah.
put it out. What do you think? And people start jumping on it and like it
Rufo
jumped to
is a journalist, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
real journalists. I'm not saying there's not, but people do this additional work.
Yeah.
Normal people like you and I, writing an article, and you get a reputation,
If you break a story.
and you break a story.
Well, and then there was a time,
force
right,
comes.
when you had to work for the New York Times for anyone to pay attention.
Exactly.
And that time
just-
is gone.
It is.
Yeah, and I think that's good.
I almost feel like this internet journalistic thing, which the New York Times folks, they want to poo-poo. You're not real journalists if you do that.
Yeah.
But I think that forced the issue on this one. Those people.
Well, the prestige positions, positions of influence and power, that's all they have. Is your credentials. Did you get the job? Did you get into the right schools? But more and more, and I think the fact that these are Ivy League schools, presidents plagiarizing, that a freshman couldn't get away with this kind of stuff,
Yes.
shows that even their credentials don't matter.
Which raises the additional question. She is not gone from Harvard. She's returning to the faculty
Oh,
with her full salary, by
that's
the way.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, $900 some odd thousand a year.
yeah.
Returning to faculty as an academic, so the plagiarism, they are just coasting, ironing over that thing completely.
Well, and
Why do you think-
I found some humor in the fact that the left will always guard their own, right?
Most of the time,
To me, that feels
80-20
it feels
rule.
like was it Ed Litton, the president
that
of
name.
the Southern Baptist Convention?
Oh.
He got elected 2 years ago, I think, and it immediately was caught in a similar thing where he was plagiarizing sermons.
Yeah.
Literally stories that he had said, illustrations. I prayed and God gave me this illustration, and then they find it 5 years ago in somebody else's sermon.
Now, that gets brought up as a complaint quite regularly. The left defend themselves and the right cannibalize themselves. What do you think of that
the
complaint?
SBC protected him. He did not resign.
Oh, okay.
So, I think old
I didn't know that,
institutions,
so, yeah.
they protect their own. That's
Yeah.
kind of, because if you go, we all go.
My thought was a little different. My thought is that there's a reason the left protects their own, and that is because the left is inclined towards the slide down, towards destruction, and suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Romans 1 ends with this. Not only do they do the same, but they approve of those who do these things.
Sure.
The
yeah.
right is a fight upward into virtue.
Yeah.
And therefore, the right is inclined to say, when our own does something, no, I'm sorry, dude, you can't do that. That's not right.
Well, and if your ideology is about obtaining power,
Yeah,
then
that's right.
methodology is secondary.
That's exactly right.
And I think, and this is where I think conservatism, we talked about what is conservatism last time and said it was lack of ideology.
Well, there was that idea. Yeah,
and I think if
put
you
out
define
there.
ideology as saying everything submits to the cause, then that's true.
Did you have that in your notes at all to talk about? Because I had a little more reflection on that.
I thought about it more, but I haven't written it in.
Okay, I didn't necessarily write it in too, because I thought about that use of the word ideology, and I almost feel like he's using it. You could use it two different ways.
Right.
And but anyway, well, let me get back to the Claudine Gay thing here and the resignation. Do you assess things, or do you hear things with any, I think I know what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear it, any double set of ears? Do you hear something from a raw political perspective? This is how I hear it, with a raw political, and then I also try to hear it as a Christian, and those are two different sets of ears that hear something like this.
When you say raw political, do you mean strategic?
Yeah. It's
like, what's the strategy and what's the
strategy,
next play?
the implications, the power base. It's not necessarily the black and white kingdom of darkness, the kingdom of light at issues, but more those are their own issues, and then you have the addressing it from just the power structures in the world, and those are political.
And so when you think about it in terms of Christianity,
so when I think about it in terms of Christianity, I don't.
Are you putting it
exactly.
into like, the spiritual force is working behind the scenes, or are you thinking in terms of what's the right moral stance with respect to the gospel?
I guess maybe, okay, let me just throw something here, because I'm not exactly sure what I think of this. Other than as a Christian, I think it was right for her to resign, when I think of it as a Christian, because there's an immoral thing that was taking place. Not only was there the anti-Semitism thing and the plagiarism, but even more deeply is her utter commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, the whole office. She made an entire office there.
Yeah.
She was the poster child for creating this at Harvard. And I think it's an evil thing that the DEI, and if you want to put, what's the other one now? Belonging, is they're trying to add to it. That whole thing is evil inherently. It's racist, is what it is, saying they're anti-racist. So as
belonging is getting added to DEI?
Yeah, DEI.
So what I've heard is
more places.
Okay, well, I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's almost like synonymous, inclusion, belonging.
Yeah.
Right?
It's replacing belonging.
I think it's replacing it in its transitional phase. But in fact, the organization I'm not going to name on our podcast that you and I have some connection with, you notice they don't use inclusion. They use the word belonging.
Well, that's the only place I've ever heard it.
Oh, yeah. That had been the only place, too, until I saw it recently in a few articles. Yeah.
Well, so I think the source they got it from, and this is a Christian organization, was a Christian guy who also does that sort of DEI training as a Christian.
Yeah, Christianized
I don't
it.
think he puts Christian verbiage in it. He does it to Fortune 500 companies, and he's an executive.
Yeah. As a political perspective, I think it was a 50-50 split. It's not a win, her resignation. There is some win in it, but it's also a loss.
Wait, how is it a loss?
Because it is not for the anti-Semitism. It is not for DEI. It's not even for plagiarism. What is absurded is that it was for the racist attacks on her. And so they're leveraging it, and right now they're getting away with that. And
yeah, but just because they claim, like that's saying because they put a spin on it, that means we don't win.
well,
There's no victory that we can obtain that doesn't include a spin that they're going to put on it.
and well, that's true, except it's whether or not that spin is itself then victorious. In other words, if that spin prevails, well, what happened is we shot a soldier, not a captain in the Army.
But how do you know if it prevails?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a part of the public.
I read one guy, Victor Davis Hansen.
Yeah, you got it.
I almost said David, who said, this is not the end. This won't be the last thing on this. So he thinks it's not over and that Harvard is still, he thinks the corporation board for Harvard will end up all resigning. And if he's true, then it will become a political victory that is, to me, in my mind, politically, it's still in the not sure what's going to happen yet.
So to me, it feels like a what do we do with Bud Light kind of moment.
Yes.
Right? It's like, okay, we did get a victory there. How extensive is it and how hard do we need to pursue it?
About that, did you see Kid Rock's comments?
Yeah, he's bringing it back?
He said we punish them enough.
Right.
Right.
And that's because he's friends with Dana White. And Dana White made the big deal.
I wondered about that too.
Yeah, he
went. The money.
Well,
what do you think about that?
He goes to the UFC events.
Because see, I think there's a political response and I think there's an element of a Christian response. Because your comment earlier about the vaccine thing was they want us to forgive it. And your point was, but nobody has said, I'm sorry we were wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so as a Christian, it's like, no, I'm sorry. The issue stays until you say, I did wrong to you.
And we've talked about forgiveness because Christians take a lot of views on that.
That's right. There is a wide range. But that's not the same as a political. You know, there's some differences there.
Well, because I don't think of a corporation as a person that needs to rebuild a relationship and trust.
I know what you're saying when you say
because
that.
if you're trusting corporations, that's kind of your fault.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can say, oh, Hobby Lobby stands for something, and that's good.
Yeah.
But it's not a relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I think.
Well, hey, if you're joining the conversation, that's probably all we're going to do on that one. We more to follow with Harvard, huh? Anyway, if you're enjoying it, make sure to click subscribe, and you can get the next episodes and updates on it. You can also click like, leave a comment, share with a friend. All right, let's talk about a couple other things here. All right. I want to talk about, you have a note here on Dershowitz, you have a note on Epstein, and we can get into both of those, but I want to put them in a context. I want your response and what your notes are, say what you want to say, but I want to put it in the larger context, which I already started to address, Christian ears. How do we hear news? Does being a Christian affect how we hear news? Right? These are two, I don't know what your Dershowitz comment, but the Epstein is big news, right?
Well, Dershowitz was on the list.
Oh, that's
he
what
went
your
to the
is.
island.
I didn't realize.
Multiple times.
I knew he was on the list, and he's made statements in the past about that.
Yeah, when he was Epstein's lawyer when Epstein got the plea deal that.
Oh, I did not know that. He negotiated that plea deal.
He was his lawyer. Yeah, he's a heavy hitter.
It's a bad look. Well, I knew he was involved. I didn't know because that plea deal was a sweetheart deal.
Yeah, in Florida.
Yeah.
That guy was so well connected.
Well, so anyway, hearing it, Christian Ears and News Nation. Well, so tell me what your thoughts are first. Alan Dershowitz.
Well,
Epstein's list.
We were talking about what's his name, Kevin Spacey, getting rehabilitated by Tucker.
Yes, that's right.
And then immediately afterward,
not knowing what's going on.
We don't know what he's up to.
Yeah.
My sense continues to be that there is this wing of the Republicans that are so practical and short-term wins.
Political in a sense.
And Trump is sort of the middle of this. There's the corporate Republicans. This is not the same.
I know what you're saying.
But they don't have a moral frame. They have victory at any cost.
That's
right.
And Trump shares that perspective somewhat.
It's his
He's
style.
Machiavellian.
Yeah. So what I see Tucker moving into that sphere. And then I see that,
do you really
to me,
see
that
it,
makes
or do you
sense.
wonder if that's what this is? When
I saw Tucker
Spacey
walking with intro
stuff?
music, and he's walking behind Trump in this parade of entry into the UFC event, I was like, Tucker's on that team.
That. I don't know how to explain that event. That was pretty palish.
Yeah.
But I don't see that because of his statement, which I mentioned before, and he says in 2020 I got involved in a way that I shouldn't have, and I don't want to again. In a sense, like he took sides, right?
Yeah.
And he said he doesn't want to do that. But you're right, walking in is pretty taking sides.
He's also openly mocking, DeSantis, which is a Trump thing to do.
Tucker is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't see a neutral Tucker at this point. Maybe he'll shift once we get farther.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is, so Dershowitz is on the flight logs or everything. There was this dump of documents
Trump's
this
name
week.
is in that as well.
Not as a flight log.
Yeah, I know.
And not as a...
Yep.
What I've seen is it looks like Trump got cleared.
Yeah.
He did know Epstein. Yeah. And rich guys in Florida.
Yeah.
When you're that rich, you're going to see each other at the same parties. And there's photos of them together at parties.
Yeah.
But there's also beef between them that Trump found out what he was up to and kicked him out.
Yeah.
Which is respectable.
It's good. Yeah.
And I heard somebody say the part of why they hate Trump so much is if this whole Epstein operation is for blackmail and control of political leaders, Trump's not blackmailable.
Yeah.
Which is shocking.
Well, let me tell you something I've said before, and you give your instinct response, and then we'll move back to the thing. I've said this statement.
Yeah.
I think almost any billionaire has corruption, even millionaire. It's very
You don't
difficult.
get to be that way.
Yes, that
without
has been my
compromise.
assertion.
Yeah.
Then I realized this. There has been no one has had, in Russia's term, an anal probe more than Trump, and they could not find something.
Right. Well, I mean,
If there was something there.
there's a lot of dirty business deals that are legal, technically,
Yeah.
but that are dishonorable.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of adultery, trading up wives.
Yeah. I'm
all
not
that
talking
stuff.
about that kind of stuff. I'm
So-
talking about
so here's what
real
I-
breaking the law.
Right. Well, real ways to leverage him, right?
Yeah, if there was something, they
right.
would have used it completely and found it and publicized it and everything.
So the thing I struggle with is I worry that Trump falls into what we were just talking about, that philosophy of the left. So I have this little post I wrote a year ago. It says, there's never a principle behind the actions if you are totalitarian. Whether you're on the right or the left, your only lust is for power. All accusations, strategies, justifications, and explanations are simply tools by which to subjugate your enemies and support your allies.
And any principle that you list, you're just flowering up. You're using it.
And that's why. So speaking
I
back
agree
to
with
your question about Christian ears, right?
Yeah.
What I see is I have sort of a true north, right? Okay, this is the Christian way of doing things around morality.
This is the way, walk in it.
Sure. But most of what separates us, most of what separates us from God, if not everything that separates us from God, is moral depravity. Okay, so that's our primary, and moving our country toward or away from that. As for what kind of wall to put in the border, or how to structure the tax code, the Bible can inform it, but I don't see a clear moral imperative outside of compassion for those in need.
Yeah.
Right, that kind of thing.
I think this is
and the
exactly
defense of a real nation.
The point I was trying to make. I agree with that. When I think of Christian ears, you use the word a principled way of doing something, maybe even to your hurt at times. I do think that's exactly what it is to be a Christian, and it affects how we hear the news and what we do with it. Whereas you don't have to function that way. You can be Machiavellian and have no principle but power. You can pretend to dress it up with principle. You can have abandoned it, but what's really driving you is the political play, the power involved.
Well, to the degree that it's like that is to the degree that we're cascading down the slippery slope.
I agree with that, especially when you put it in terms of the way it's increasing like that, right and left.
Correct. Yeah.
I agree with that.
And so it's
not a good thing, but it is a thing.
What I see is sort of like a target. I remember in high school we did this experiment on randomness. Okay, and there's like a bullseye target on a piece of paper, but the paper was like the carbon paper. When you hit it, it's going to show through. It's going to make a mark. So we had little ball bearings, and we were aiming for the middle and dropping 100 times. And when you're done, you have this distribution of dots. Okay, that's how I think about. Okay, if Christianity and God's kind of way of nations, what he wants nations to do is in the middle. And when I think of all the players, I think of them as, they're closer to the right spot, to that middle, some than others. Because in political terms, some people are way off the range. Some people are just off, but to the left, just off, but to the right. And so I want to get as close to the middle as I can get. Not the middle meaning
I know what you're saying.
the middle between Democrat and Republican. But the center, the moral
bullseye.
center. Yeah. So when I watch the news and I see Claudine Gay or I see Trump or I see whomever, I'm always thinking and trying to discern, he's moving away, right? I feel Trump moving away, that his promises, his claims of what he cares about are like melting. right? The 2016 Trump and now Trump is totally different.
There are
right.
changes.
He's mocking people who said they wanted the wall or thought he would get it. Like, what are you talking about? He's distancing himself from pro-life movement, which is the ones who got him there. So there's all these ways that he's shifting his position, and so now I have to reevaluate. Mm-hmm. I'm not putting hope or trust in these guys. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to see them right. Mm-hmm. And I try to do that with a lot of relationships. So if someone betrays me or backstabs me or in some other way, right, or disappoints me or lets me down, to me, it's just more information to rightly see where they actually are. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I thought you were close, and in fact, you're far. Mm-hmm. And so it hurts because I misunderstood what this was, but it's better because now I can see the truth.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, hey, if you like what you're hearing, and you thought, boy, I wish my kids could listen in on this. The Trinity School, something Luke runs, a culture building enterprise, as he calls it, and this is the way they try to think, and he does a little bit of some novel approaches using influence, industry, the arts, a little bit of business, some education, a lot of reading, writing.
Yeah.
And you can learn more. You can become involved financially with gracestaten.com/Trinity School. And then the new term, that must be your note from last week, starts tomorrow. You started this week.
We started this week.
Year-round school, every quarter, 9 out of
9 weeks on, 4 weeks off.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend who was saying, oh, you must be getting ready to enroll for next year. You sort of, this is the time of year when you start thinking about enrollment. I was like, it's been since 2020, kind of.
Yeah.
So 3 years. Yeah. September doesn't start school anymore.
I think what's the dilemma is that when you've gotten accustomed to summer off, you like the idea, but we just forget that this was made when an agricultural society was our largest influencing factor, and kids had to go work with the farm and hay, and what the summer meant. Our family unit's got to work.
Yeah, well, and
that's not the case anymore.
Locally, like SIO, there's a lot of kids running hay in the summer.
But not from a national perspective.
No, that's true. And one of the things that I get to do in this endeavor is there's a bunch of research-supported methods that public schools and most private schools just don't do. Year-round school is one of them. There's a bunch of others. How we handle grades, grade levels, grade point averages. We changed all of that, and kids are doing better because of it.
I feel like if we were to be writing, oh my goodness, I forgot to bring that book, Dominion. I have it set out so I won't forget it. Anyway, but if we were writing, I have this sneaking suspicion that education is one of those topics that is in a 20 to 40 year adjustment taking place. And it has been for a period of time. And it's being, school choice is one of those issues, and things are changing, and the totalitarian grip is becoming tighter because out of desperation, which means they're losing more, but tighter grip.
The tighter you squeeze, the more that slips through your fingers.
That's right. And then people like you and others are trying to assess what is the best education, not just for, well, I suppose partly for our time and the way we live now. What is the best way to approach it? And anyway, it's an interesting time. All right, let's move on here. Let's talk a little bit about, you got a comment here about Percy Jackson, which we mentioned the other day. What's your thought there?
So there's a new Percy Jackson show.
I saw that.
And Greek mythology is a part of our culture since forever.
It's part of Western civilization, the Greek and Roman versions of the fallen gods.
Of the fallen gods, yeah. And what is it? The mighty men of old kind of thing. But part of this came from a conversation we were having, I think off the air, talking about all the ways that we've brought in kind of these pagan ways of thinking, assuming that it's not going to affect our Christian way of thinking. So these pagan systems of belief and worship and culture are designed around a lie.
When you say pagan belief, you mean, let's just say, the way the Romans thought about this world of spirits.
Yeah, and I don't just mean Greco-Roman. I also I mean pagan generally,
worldwide. Right? But we're the ones under that. Western civilization is that.
But one of the things I'm seeing more of, I think you see it with Harry Potter. I think you see it with a lot of popular culture. I mean, there was a cartoon coming out about a teenage girl falling in love with Satan and having his baby. Like just we're going all the way down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Into it. And by down, I don't just mean down toward hell,
Yeah.
but really it's down toward a like really, really old kind of animistic way
Yeah,
of thinking about spirits all around
the
us.
reign of paganism.
That's right.
The before Jesus reign of paganism is trying to assert itself again.
So there's two ways that I think about non-Christian religious systems. One is honest people trying to understand a complicated world and an inner life that they can't necessarily see into because it hasn't been revealed to them by God, or maybe to some small degrees it has, because God's the God of all the nations, right? Even though his revelation is in most ways centered around Israel and Jesus. But the other one is that there are active spiritual beings seeking to deceive everyone and draw them away from God, who are manipulating those religious systems. So when we bring in...
And the authors of them.
That's right. So when we bring in Harry Potter, or if we bring in Native American spiritualism or Percy Jackson, right? It's easy for me to say, oh, we're going to find the Christian story in there, right? Harry Potter is the hero who is born again, like he's killed by the enemy and he overcomes Satan. And you can see the Christian metaphor. And the author even openly says that she's deliberately trying to make a Jesus story. But it creates millions of kids walking around trying to participate in real occult magic.
Let me restate it back to you in different words and see if this is what you're meaning or implying. Because there has been a long-standing tradition within the Christianity. It's what Lewis resulted in his own conversion from Tolkien and some of his other friends. They were reading myth and the history of Western civilization, and their argument was that Jesus is the myth that's real. He's Balder that really raised from the dead. He's Odin, and all these things, he's the real one. Those were all shadows pointing at him. I'm wondering if what you're saying is, the question would be, are you not liking that? But B, say you're not liking that. It's just the point being to regress back to shadows is not the same as to see in shadow something and to walk out of it. To walk out of shadow towards the reality is one thing. To be in the light of the reality and be walking back towards the shadows is quite another thing. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure exactly how I would... There's layered metaphors there. What I keep thinking of is, my first assumption on this, or the kind of the way I grew up thinking about it, was that we're going to find gospel truth. Like I'm going to read Taoism, right? The Tao Te Ching, and I'm going to read it and say, there's a lot of wisdom in here.
Eternity in their hearts. You're familiar with that book? Yeah, that the echoes of God are in everything.
Yeah.
Every pagan thing you find.
And I'm not disagreeing with that now.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I'm sort of
you're not
learning
disagreeing with it.
I'm just sort of saying, okay, what about caution?
And what about the distortions? Do
in
you
what
embrace
ways
the distortions?
are we creating vulnerabilities?
Yeah.
And I think for my kids, right?
Yeah.
To be drawn away toward a deception.
Yeah.
That's insidious.
Yeah. In a sense, what I'm hearing you say is that you're not denying that reality, eternity in their hearts, that is images Jesus, but it's also an angel of light. It's asking you to embrace everything it's saying in the shadows. And if that's what's going to be, you're going to be doomed. You're going to shipwreck.
And it also smacks a little bit of something we've talked about before, about like the winsomeness movement, and saying, well, are we always just trying to meet in the middle with every corrupt way that the world has turned from God? And say, well, let's get them halfway. Whereas Jesus is more of saying, no, you need to come to me.
How I'm hearing your point and finding myself wanting to agree, whether you're saying it exactly this way or not, is that when I look at old literature and pagan things that are from a long time ago, I agree with you that those were real spirits. It's not mythology. It's not unreal things. And those spirits behind them are still alive today. I think they interact in a different way for the most part. But to look back at those old things and see, they can't escape the God story, and here's where that to me is quite different than writing a new story and writing a new Percy Jackson novel and writing a new and saying, well, we want to create a new story that is filled with shadow and hints. No, the reality is there now. You don't have to go back. You don't have to go into dark, the whole thing, a land Zebulun, a land living in darkness.
Yeah, but this connects to our Second Commandment. debate or conversation we had last episode.
How so?
Because if you said, "Oh, we don't need to remake the story of Perseus,"
I see where
right?
you're going now.
We should be remaking the story of Jesus. But now you're saying, "Well, wait a minute, that's too holy. Like you don't just mess with that." Like I think, okay, if Marvel tried to make a version, and this is
I
a
see
little
where you're going with
ridiculous,
that.
if they made a version of the gospel,
Yeah.
right, with superpowers and
Well,
superheroes,
it's not Iron Man.
Christians would
in
be
a
offended,
sense,
though, wouldn't
he
they?
gives his life at the end for this cause, right?
Right.
There is a substitution and a death, the one for the many.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what I'm saying is virtues are virtues in every culture. We all have our own compromises. It's sort of like you can drop that.
Is there a difference between a storyline that picks up these themes versus a statement of reality? Like, I fell in love with the devil, your illustration. I don't know what show that is. That's not just hints at shadows. That's a whole storyline. Why don't you take this whole line?
Yeah.
That the evil spirits are not evil, and therefore you're good, and you can be on their side for good. No. That's not the same as Marvel having something, and they work in Christian elements, maybe not even intending to, but that's because the echo of the cross and of creation and these things, you can't escape them if you're going to tell a good story.
Right. Part of what I'm thinking, though, is, well, two things come up. One is, the Church of Satan says we don't actually worship Satan, we're just making fun of Christians. And I think, yeah, that's what Satan wants you to think you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? You're still putting up statues and
Yeah.
honoring and sacrificing and all the things. But the other part of that, too, is if Satan was trying to draw someone astray, he starts, like thinking of Eve in the garden, he starts with, did God really say? And it's 90% truth and then one little bit to slide in there. So you can look at the Marvel movies or any movie and say, oh, I can see the gospel. I see truth in there. But that doesn't mean it isn't part of a strategy to draw us away. It just means that it's not blatant. And so what I want to think about is, and I'm not saying don't watch Marvel movies if you're Christian, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying open your eyes. Think about what it is they're trying to tell you.
Maybe
And
that's a good way to...
Don't just
yeah.
like drink it in.
Yeah. Angels of light.
Yeah.
Angels of light.
Explain that a little bit for someone who doesn't
Well,
familiar
it
with
says that Satan himself, the prince of fallen beings, portrays himself as an angel, of a messenger of God, that he's light and good.
Yeah.
And that's not what's inside. And then you have the phrases that speak in the imagery of last time's imagery, that there'll be such delusions in a sense that even the elect would be deceived if that was possible. So this angel of light idea is the forces of darkness are able to portray themselves as forces of good.
Yeah.
And we're susceptible to that delusion. And the point, I think, of the passage, the end times one, is that even Christians are susceptible to this. It's God who's keeping them from being swept up. God keeps them from being able to be swept away by the delusion of the devil, really.
So we've talked about the culture war as a battle between the head and the heart. And I have a system of explaining it where you're power struggling between yourself and others. But part of where that system came from was a pastor, Greg Mitchell, in Vancouver, BC, who I grew up listening to. He would talk about religion and rebellion. That God is a God of love and authority. We reject his love by making it religious rules. And we reject his authority in rebellion. And we say we're going to do it our way. Well, someone who's making up religious rules, instead of accepting the true love of God, is susceptible to an angel of light who comes and says, I'll make you even more pure, even more religious. And someone in rebellion, rejecting God's authority, they're more vulnerable to just open corruption and darkness and, Church of Satan kind of nonsense and mockery of God. But they're both the same strategy, drawing us away from the center, which is accepting God, his love and authority. Not saying I have to do these things or I refuse to do these things. But I will do these things because he's good.
Dying. All right, recommendations. I got an empty page here with your name on it. You got a recommendation for us? I'm gonna draw you over the coals if you don't.
Let the coals begin. I don't have anything jumping out.
Nothing.
I haven't been participating in a lot of culture this week to recommend. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the podcasts I listen to are on hiatus or just starting to come back. I'm looking forward to the Iowa caucuses. I feel like this actual election season is going to kick off with something besides polls that nobody believes are real, or at least
I just read an article.
nobody
Somebody
wants to.
made a prediction about them. Charles Hurt, Washington Times.
Okay.
His prediction was this: don't get excited about the Iowa caucuses from a media perspective, because, well, he thinks Trump's going to win them, but he said it doesn't matter what happens, because they're going to say if DeSantis does well, or if Haley does well, if anybody but Trump does well, they're going to say it's a loss for Trump because this person did better than they were expected, or that person did better than they were expected, and they're just going to bump you out to the next one.
Yeah. And the election was stolen. Nobody trusts anything.
In other words, the media it doesn't matter which way it goes. It doesn't matter what happens in Iowa. It will be moving forward. They're going to hate it, and they're going to try to make you despair over it.
Right.
And I thought, you know what? Actually, I think that's true. I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Get ready to despair.
I think it's New Hampshire and then South Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Did you follow the thing with Nikki Haley? She got excoriated for?
No.
She's in New Hampshire, and then she repeats it in Iowa. She says to the New Hampshire audience, hey, New Hampshire, you're second in line. You're the one who corrects Iowa's vote. Because she's losing in Iowa. You know, between her and DeSantis, forget whether Trump is or isn't, and you have your thoughts on
Way
mine.
out in the lead, yeah.
But forget that. Just between the two of them, she's losing Iowa and he's beating her.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire, she's beating him.
She got the governor's endorsement in New Hampshire.
And then she thinks going home to South Carolina is going to pull it in 2-1, DeSantis.
Right.
Well, she gets to Iowa and they bring it up and they start booing her.
Ooh.
She goes, come on, guys, I was just joking and playing around. Can't we have more fun in politics? But it's like, she put her foot in her mouth, man.
She's had a couple of those the last week or so with the slavery question. Did you hear about that?
I did see that.
Somebody asked her what was the cause of the Civil War.
Don't even understand that.
So here's what I think it is. There's a lot of conservatives. So with the tearing down of the Confederate monuments, there's a lot of Christian conservatives in the South who think that the South gets a bad rap. And that, in fact, the Civil War wasn't about slavery, because slavery wasn't even, most Southerners don't own slaves. It was about defending our homes and our heritage and our way of life. And this is the Confederate flag debate that has went around and seems to have been over.
States' rights.
Yeah. So what that guy was
Which
doing...
has some truth in it. That was a major issue.
Yeah, and I think if you had asked...
But it was
I heard
states'
somebody
rights
say...
over the ability to have slaves.
Yeah. I think if you had asked a soldier, an average soldier in the South, why are you fighting? It's because they invaded. Right. And if you asked a soldier in the North, why are you fighting?
Did you ever watch
preserve the Union?
Glory?
Yeah.
Matthew Bright.
Well,
yeah.
it's been a while, but
that was the 90s, right?
yeah, it was. I think I watched it in high
the
school.
campfire, and they're with the Union soldiers, and they're friends. They're all friends.
Yeah.
And they're just saying, they're stating their case.
Well, and I looked up Robert E. Lee. Like, he was a great American.
Oh my goodness.
He fought for them, but
he was tremendous.
That's right. He had a long and storied life after the war, in ways that he deserves that honor, I think.
Yeah. Well, hey, recommendation, leaving you blank. I'm hanging you out to dry on this. All right, tell me what you got. Advice to young men. You said there's a listener question or comment. What happened?
So I thought I would throw in some comments that I get, because I interact more on social media than
I do.
Than
have a comment if we don't have much time here.
Oh, we got time.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Tell me your thing here.
All right. So I had posted something on Facebook and the like, giving advice to young men that the purpose of dating is to find a wife, or actually the way I phrased it was to build a team that is your family.
Okay. Build a team that is your family. Okay.
And dating is tryouts.
Okay.
Do you want her on your team or not?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then I listed several things. Is she flaky? Is she irresponsible? Is she shallow? Like, you should be evaluating and not just saying, am I in love or not? Is she beautiful or not? Right. There's more to it. And I said at the end, your life is too long to settle, basically. You need to build, you're going to get stuck in this thing if you're not careful. So I got some comments and some likes, as you do. But I immediately had a couple of friends, people I know and respect, saying, well, why just young men, and sort of interpreted it, I think, as sort of a dig on women. Like, oh, you're out to you're kind of digging on them. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, listen, why does it bother you that I'm giving advice to, like, why can't I give advice to young men? I have 3 sons.
Yeah.
The vast majority of my students at my school
but they're
are men,
hearing
are
something
boys.
different. They're hearing a form of exclusivity that the reason that there's a reason you're addressing men.
And when I posted it, I had this in mind a little bit, and that is that I've seen pastors do this repeatedly, where they'll do the same post for men and women, and then people in the post for men cautioning against women, right?
Yeah.
Or seen as a criticism of women. That gets all of the anger and the spite, and the one for men gets ignored.
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought I could do both, and then I could point to the other one because I kind of knew something would come up. But I thought, I'm not here to play games. I'm just trying to give a good post, you know? And so I just said, what's wrong with this? Why can't I just post?
Yeah.
And they said, you can, but you shouldn't. And it didn't really go to a solution. So I took the post, I made a female version, young women, but I put a little twist in it. I said, dating is a tryout where you're applying to be in the family that your husband is building. So rather than switching it and saying you're building a family, like I said to the young men, but I listed the exact same criticisms and life is too long. Don't fall for it, right? And I decided I was going to start making these posts where I take crazy things or just sassy things that I see posted online for women, and I'm going to cross it out and put men. So I've done them, and I want to share with you a couple.
Wait, but with the adjustment, right? You're going to do it the other direction, but you're going to make the adjustment. Or no, you're not making any adjustment. So when you did the man thing and you got some flack, and so you decided to make women, you called it a twist. I was calling it an adjustment.
Yeah.
Because you think of the role of a man and the role of woman as having some different priorities.
Right.
And I share that belief with you. And that's what you're customizing to the feminine and to the masculine, the same context.
Yes. A little bit.
Is that what you're saying you're going to do here? You're going to find post women and customize it for men? Or are you going to just carry it over?
Well, some of both.
A little mockery.
Sometimes to carry it straight over to show how ridiculous it is, right?
Absurd. Yeah.
So, but it's not always absurd. It's just interesting. So one of them was a post to 2 moms. This was posted by a mom who I'm friends with on Facebook, saying to teenage girls, if there's a man making you feel unsafe, find an older woman and say, hey, mom, this guy's bothering me, and she'll protect you. So that's a great post,
This is
right?
somebody else posted that.
Somebody else posted it. I was just passing it by.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I said, okay, well, why isn't there a man's version?
All right.
So I said, teenage girls, if you're ever out and a man is making you feel unsafe, same scenario, look around and spot an older male. Make eye contact and say, hey, dad, this guy's bothering me.
No, girl. This girl's bothering me.
No.
Wait, you're posting?
It's still to young girls.
Oh.
But instead of telling the young girl, go find a woman, go find an older man and say dad instead of mom. But the point is just to say we don't have to just put men in this category all the time, right? And so that was kind of fun and got some good feedback. And then the other one I've done so far, I've only done 2, was I just crossed out the word woman or women and so that it says men, right?
And let it stand.
Yeah. And it says this, women are told we catch more flies with honey.
We catch more flies with honey. Okay.
But I can catch plenty with your hollowed out carcass, so this can go either way.
Okay.
Okay, so it's just kind of a silly something women would say.
Yeah.
Because nobody's afraid they're going to hollow out your carcass.
A little man bashing.
But I just crossed out and made it men.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's super dark.
No kidding.
Like threatening to kill you and let your
right.
body gather flies.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
I can slap you around.
But it does convey part of this, that there's this sense in our culture that men need to be slapped around. Does that make sense?
I do.
And so that's what I'm pushing back on.
Yeah. I think what's challenging about this is, and I think where you and I would agree in general, but maybe in particulars we could just not necessarily see eye to eye, but there is a difference between masculine and feminine, and it's by God.
Yeah.
And so if that's true, what does that mean that there's differences? How do you try to figure it out and work with it? Even, let's say you got room to make mistakes, that's fine. But we want it, rather than saying there's no difference.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's absurd.
So here's a question I've been pondering. Okay. We talk about the 80-20 rule a lot.
Yeah.
Right? That things that apply to men, 80% of men,
Yeah.
let's say. But part of me thinks, and my experience bears this out, but not enough that I would say with certainty yet. And I'm prone to say things with certainty, maybe before I'm certain. But the thought is, if, the majority of women are a certain way, is it that the ones who aren't have a wound?
I know
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
So I have a dear friend, and
there's no answer.
She
I think.
hates gift giving. She doesn't hate it,
Yeah.
but she doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And she tells the story, right?
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, this happened, and I don't want gifts.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, so the whole like love language around gift giving is a big thing people talk about.
Yeah.
And I think, well, would it have been?
Yeah.
Maybe it would have been the centerpiece.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
And now it's at the edge.
And my own take on that, because I've thought about that same thing, is we can't know, because here's what we live in. We live in a cancer-ridden, sin-filled universe. We live in ourselves corruption, and the world is under this curse and groaning under it. We don't have the eyes to see what was and would have been. We know it's something, and we try to grasp, but we don't know to what degree even 80-20 is that a result of distortion?
Well,
Or is it a general thing that God still would have put in the world in an unfallen state?
yeah.
But
I think you can know, though. And here's what I mean.
Not in particulars. But
No.
I think there's some particulars. So let me give this one, and then you say if this meets what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Physical disabilities,
Right.
or ugliness, or overweight tendencies, or all manner of biological distortion.
Yeah.
I think without the fall never would have been at all. And my personal belief is every human being would be in some way stunningly beautiful. Every woman, every man,
In our heavenly bodies.
or the unfallen one, even had there been no fall. But yes, in the heavenly one as well. And so I look at that and I think there is no place at all for the genetic codes to break down.
Right.
And, in whatever way. I just don't think that God made the world with that kind of randomness or 80-20 split.
But you see the ministry of Jesus is healing. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people be healed. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what I'm saying is that, and I think physical disability is a good example.
Limitations, right?
Tell me what you mean.
Well, so somebody, I just use an illustration, whether you have anger, that's very difficult to parse, or you have, let's say, alcoholism, that is a very observable phenomena,
right?
Both of choice and brain chemistry rewiring. When Jesus delivered somebody from both, it's almost never completely gone as a problem. They get over a hump and the power of it is broken, but they're on their guard, and it's a foe that they have now been able to overcome, but it hasn't ceased to exist. It's not annihilated.
The question to me, I mean, we don't annihilate sin by setting people free, right? We don't annihilate illness by healing. Right. But we do break its power. I agree with that.
Yep.
But what I have seen is people get genuine spiritual healing and their personality changes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you say, well, that person has a temper, or that person was angry, and it's not, it's gone. And it's gone in the way that someone that you would never think would be angry, that's how they are now.
Yeah. George Foreman's a good example of this.
But I think that's the power of the gospel applied.
Yeah.
That what we're doing, or I think what experience and pain and the world all together is trying to get us to do, is say, no, that's just who I am now.
Yeah.
In the same way that woman with the issue of blood could have said, well, this is just who I am now, and this is the life I have.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She pursued Jesus.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that, and I think you'll agree with the next statement. And if so, I will leave it there. John Wimber, for example.
Okay.
A Vineyard
I know about
teaches
him.
classes
Yeah, sure.
down at Stanford. Was it Stanford? No, the other one, Fuller, on how to have miracles, how to have a ministry of miracles. Controversial.
And you said Vineyard or Calvary Chapel? John Wimber.
He was Vineyard.
Vineyard. Okay.
Anyway, he dies of cancer.
Sure.
And
everybody dies.
Everybody dies.
Yeah.
And his was cancer. And he just said, And he prayed to be healed of it.
Right.
And he said, the Lord said, well, essentially, no.
Yeah, right.
So when you say that, to be open to it, to seek it is right, there's not a promise that your life is going to have that healing in it. He might say no.
He might say no.
Yeah.
Nobody lives forever.
That's right.
Except maybe John the Apostle.
Let me tell you, my example of spoofing the men and women one, and I've used it more than once. When I've done marriage counseling and going to perform a wedding, there are occasions you meet a couple and the wife is a very strong personality and the man is a very agreeable temperament.
Yeah.
That in itself, I don't think is anything wrong with that or outside of God's design. But when they usurp roles because of it, then I think we're getting outside of design. And you can't necessarily in the 4, 5, or 6 times you're going to meet with them address this, what might be a major thing.
Yeah.
But you need to put it out on the table, right?
You're talking about in a counseling
conversation.
conversation.
Because it's very limited what you can do. You're really wanting to lay out 6 things. Let's just make sure we have an open conversation because in 15 years, you're still going to be talking about this.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? So the way I've approached it to get the attention of the woman, because she doesn't want to see this and she can't, and they're about to get married and he's not, it's just not going to be something you're going to get far. But I've asked it this way. I asked the woman, so would you like to be down at the altar and have your mother-in-law bring the husband down the aisle and hand him off to you?
Right.
Of course, indignant.
Yeah.
But you just make this point that there is something in your heart as a woman. As
I'm
much
just envisioning
as you
her
strive,
trying to carry him across the threshold.
exactly.
All those things. Right.
But it's illustrating a little bit of the absurdity, and I have never yet met a bride, the strongest personality possible, feministically oriented as possible, that wants that to happen.
Right.
They want to be given away by their father to this man, even if in every other battlefront, they'll say, that's not what I want.
So what I see in that situation then is a huge vulnerability that she would become resentful that this husband who's timid so that she could be safe doesn't carry her across the threshold or protect her in that powerful way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what my post was about, is thinking about people like that and saying, how do you because reorienting, the DNA of a marriage is really hard. It takes years and years. You can't just say,
true.
oh yeah, let's change it.
And it might not happen.
Yeah.
I did think another thought, and going back to your original posting, what you posted, the pushback you got, and what you're going to do as a result. How do you think, and I'm just curious as to your answer, when you had, what was your original post was to make a marriage, to make a family. That's what you said.
Yeah, building
make a
family. Yeah.
How do you square that with the first Genesis 1? So Genesis 2 has this man is created first and the woman, and there's this element of the differences between them are highlighted in the story. Mm-hmm. The Genesis 1 version, the elements of their sameness.
Okay.
Let us make man in our image, male and female. And that's it. Let them have dominion, both together. Mm-hmm. If somebody said to you, how would you respond? If they said, I see your point, especially from Genesis 2, but I'd like to make the point that the husband and the wife both build a family, a la Genesis 1. They're both given dominion over the world together.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to disagree with your thoughts on Genesis 2, but are you making room for the Genesis 1 dynamic as well? And therefore, she does have a family building role to play.
Well, she's literally building the babies.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think of course, you're never going to get
the dominion
the whole picture.
Is a part of that role. It's not just the baby making, because then somebody's going to say, "You're just saying they're a baby maker. They're a machine to pump out babies."
They're trying to make baby making machines.
I know.
It's evil. Well, I don't think it's just, but I don't think it's demeaning in any way. I think that's the heart of the feminist lie, is that motherhood is somehow not enough.
I agree with that. I think that's true. But
I'm saying is you can't put a complete theology of marriage into a 2-sentence Facebook post.
Yeah.
But also, most things that I post are not trying to create a comprehensive view of things. They're trying to be corrective.
Yeah.
So the place that we need correction, like I was saying earlier, is this drumbeat that men need to be put in their place and
see. Here's what's interesting.
Diminished.
When you say that, what flashed through my head as you said that, and I'm listening, but I also have a series of thought, boom, 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 is you gravitate towards that kind of, you're not trying to build an overarching balance thing. You're trying to make a corrective statement to an imbalance.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm wired the other way. I want to make statements. If there's an imbalance, I want to say something, but I want to couch it, and so it comes out, I'm advocating for the balance of it.
Yeah. But I think
Isn't that
that does,
interesting? Personality-wise.
I think that does speak to who we're speaking to. Who do we think of as our audience? Because part of what I'm seeing is, okay, I see my teenage sons and their friends getting clips from social media of Andrew Tate nonstop.
Yeah.
Who's putting forth this image of masculinity
Yeah.
that's corrupt.
Yeah. Or has corruption in it.
That's right. And so I think, okay, if I'm trying to create a place of peace between men and women, so that the men would feel masculine and the women would feel safe, or whatever, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
Those young men watch that from the masculine side with very little exposure to femininity outside of their sisters and moms.
Yeah.
Right. But thinking of women as something to be conquered.
Yeah.
And I want to be over there and say, you guys, there's a better way. And say it from a masculine perspective.
Yeah.
And so there is a place, obviously, for someone to be in the let's heal marriages. Right?
Nuance, tension
That's just
points.
not what I'm trying to do.
Right. That was interesting. All right, here's what we're going to do in our fading moments here.
Okay, and I have a little bonus if we get time.
Okay.
A little bonus thought.
What's the bonus? What's the topic?
It's about emotions.
Emotions?
Yeah.
Do they fit where we've been with men and women? Because if so, we can do it right now. And then I'm going to jump to make your gospel-centered point, and I'm going to skip my thing there.
Well, and we've done
Unless
that a little
we
bit.
want to skip the last two, why don't we do this? Do your emotion, then I'm going to ask you what is pi, and we'll make a point and close with that.
Okay, all right, that's a good one.
That'll be fun.
All right, so I was praying with somebody this morning. We've been going through his personal history and sort of a Christian version of counseling where we're saying, okay, what are the places that hurt from your past and how do they echo into present? And then what are the spiritual forces of evil that are trying to draw you away and corrupt your thinking?
Leverage those wounds.
Yep. And create ruts of addictive behaviors and all this stuff. Okay.
Yep.
And I was able to put into words something we've explored a little bit about emotions.
Okay.
And that is that emotions sit in between what you believe and what you do. And so my contention that we've talked about before is that emotions aren't sinful. They cannot be. They can lead to sin. So you're angry and then you sin, right? You're proud. Well, pride is a sin because it's a belief, right? But that feeling of I need to protect myself or exalt myself becomes the act of exalting yourself that then God says, I'm going to humble you. I'm going to resist you, right? And so what I was able to put into words today was this idea that your emotions are the signals that you need to go look for the lies you're believing. Mm-hmm. Because the lie you believe creates the sin that you act out. Mm-hmm. And the emotion is in the middle. You say, well, he made me angry, therefore I committed this sin against my brother, right?
Now, I agree exactly with that approach, what you just said. And remember when you read the language that should we give up on or not? Triggering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think that's exactly how you identify what's really happening is when you see something off and you say, why is this off? Where is this coming from?
Especially an outsized emotional reaction. You think
every time it's outsized, that is your massive bullhorn blaring. Look.
Yeah.
You have a clue here.
And
trace this down. God's after this.
Part of what I've struggled with is say, okay, but look for what? And that's where I'm honing in is say, oh, I'm looking for lies. Mm-hmm. Where I said, like,
yes, that's right.
Right? Like Satan says
or
to
wound.
Eve. Yeah, but why does the wound not heal?
Yes.
The lie is keeping it raw. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so this terrible thing happened to you.
Yeah.
And I want to speak this to our audience, right?
Yeah.
Almost everyone has had a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Even if it's not terrible compared to my thing, it was for you. And to say, okay, you have this wound, but it's been years and it still hurts. And when someone touches it, you get an explosion of emotion. And that's because there's something in there. And I think fundamentally, all those beliefs are about God. That he didn't protect me. That he didn't provide for me. He didn't love me. Mm-hmm. He wasn't good. Mm-hmm. He said he was good and he wasn't there. And those are all lies. He was there. Mm-hmm. He is acting to protect you. If he hadn't protected you, worse things would have happened. You can't imagine.
That's true.
And the depths of darkness you think you've seen, you haven't.
Yeah.
It goes darker and darker.
Yeah.
And so not only was God there, but he's here now to bring that healing if when you let go of the lie, and you need to repent of the lie.
It's true.
You repent of the sin that you committed, but you also repent of believing that
But
lie.
I think you should say it softly. It's
Say
true.
it. Whisper it.
Well, I'm just saying, when you are hurt and there's lies,
Yeah.
it's very hard to see. And if you say sharply, strongly to someone about repentance, their woundedness covers their ears and they will not hear you. But it still has to be said to them.
Yeah. And it depends. Yeah. I hear you on that.
I think another interesting thing about that is, and I don't hear you saying this, but I wouldn't want anybody to overhear it or misunderstand it, is you're not saying that as soon as you discover a lie, well, man, you can be, it's going to be something you are going to fight. There's a reason it stayed a long time, and it has shaped your life. It's going to shape your life. But commit to the process of discovering the lies, repenting of them, asking God. It will take time, but that is what God's design is to heal you from them.
In this conversation we were having with a friend this morning, I had a list of things because we've met a few times.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, as soon as we started, I thought, I'm not supposed to go through the list, but I don't have anything else. And so we prayed.
Yeah.
And it felt right away like, oh, there's a light and it's shining right over here. And this
On
other
this particular-
feels totally unrelated.
Yeah.
And within 15 minutes, it was like, oh, that's actually everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's the heart of all the dysfunction we were trying to address.
Yeah.
It's really good.
That's encouraging. You know what is remarkable about that? And then I want to go back and ask a question about the emotions in between belief and acts. What's remarkable about the way the wounding things take place, and even our sinful, they are our sin. What I had to grapple with is becoming a Christian, and my first series of years was on the repentant side, and God is just, and I need to humble myself, and I was unable to see that you can be sinned against, and I was unable to hear that.
Yeah.
Then I went into a phase of a few years where I thought about that a lot. And then after I spent enough time there, I was able then to a last one where the two together are true.
Yeah.
And I just spent one set of time denying that you can be sinned against and hurt. Not that there couldn't be bad things, but this had to do with myself. And then a season where I was only having compassion and not thinking about repentance. And then a third season where I had to put the two together. You can be sinned against, and then you can sinfully respond to those sins.
That's right.
And it's like, I have to be compassionate to myself. This was done to me. And I have to reprove myself, but you responded this way. So for me, I retreated to my mind.
Yeah.
Right? And having to repent of that proud response to cover over pain. And then what's remarkable about it is how wounds also are a pathway. They overdevelop certain gifts God gives you.
Yeah.
And you become strong in those areas. They become strengths, and God graciously uses them. But the whole way to get there was a distortion. It's a Popeye he's got skinny legs and these bulging arms, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right.
And it's remarkable because God uses even our wounds to bring good things. And then you have blind spots that come from it as well.
So what I hear you saying in that story was, first you had to recover God's authority, his judgments.
And that was becoming a Christian.
And that was putting down self-pity.
Any of that, yeah.
Right?
And yes, that's right.
But then you had to go back and relearn self-focused compassion. Right.
That's right.
Self-pity is just, it's just pride.
Yes, that's right.
Wounded pride.
Yeah, it is wounded
But
pride.
compassion is different.
It is.
It's just saying, no, I want what's best, and this is
Yeah,
best.
but then it becomes indulgent.
If you're not careful, right?
It does become that.
Yeah.
I do think to anybody. And so it has to be. And so now I say they're interwoven. We are wounders and we are wounded. And that's in my opening read when I say hostile and hurting culture.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that. Both are true.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to look, especially in our current setting, of the hostility of our culture. And that is true.
Oh, without a doubt.
But they are also hurting and lost.
Well, and we haven't
And
even
the two
talked
work
about
together.
the most recent Iowa shooter, high school
I know,
shooter.
that's true.
Another trans.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's people that are wounded and feel backed into a corner in the culture war.
Yeah, that's right.
It might.
That's right.
That group.
Okay,
is
let
quite
me
a
go
bit.
back and ask you a question on emotions between belief and acts.
Yeah.
And you said, so I don't think they're sinful. I hear you on this.
Yeah.
A part of me wants to say I agree with that from a theoretical perspective. Let me ask this, though, and that's why I asked you before.
Okay.
Desire, an emotion?
Is desire an emotion? So when I hear the word desire, I think of physiological more, like hunger. Is that what you mean by
I
it?
don't mean that one by it, but it would be a part of it category.
Yeah.
But that's a little different because the bodily demand, hunger for food is essential to survival.
But that's a good example, though, because hunger is not sinful.
No,
Being
hunger's
hungry is
not.
never wrong.
No,
Right? I think sexual desire by itself is not sinful.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But then the word lust in the New Testament is epithumios, strong desire.
Okay.
And the word is used that the spirit lusts against the flesh in Galatians. So epithumios is a God thing.
Right.
And epithumios, if you look on a woman with epithumios, you've committed adultery.
Right.
And so you have this word of strong desire, and I'm wondering if you see that as a part of the emotion package, because then, and here's where I struggle. In theory, I want to follow you.
Yeah.
But then I look at verses and say, I'm told not to have strong, I'm told in one context to have strong emotion,
Yeah.
and in another, or strong desire, and another, no, it's a sin.
So the way I would respond to, because it sounds like that's the main issue, is that lust
That particular
commandment,
one.
right? I would go beyond the
only one I could
word
think of.
itself, like the epithumios, and say I think there's more to how we should think about lust than what the literal word is saying, strong desire. I think lust, I think John Piper taught it well, and I'm trying to remember back a few years when I heard this. It is that lust is when your strong desire tells a story and you decide to walk into that story.
Which would fit your thing about the acts.
Right.
And when you said that, you decide to walk in the story, even mentally, is what you would say Jesus is talking about.
I think exclusively mentally. Yeah.
Well, obviously, if you
I mean, if
follow
you can
through,
go have sex, of course, but
Yes.
he's not talking about lust in that case.
No, he isn't.
It's
He's
lust
saying,
acted
yes.
out. But I think that the meditating on the
Yeah.
desire
I
and
hear
turning
you
it
on that,
into
because that passage, what's unique about that in the Sermon on the Mount is, it is, I don't remember the language, but it is more than just the passing of a desire through you. It's that you look upon her with an intention to take from it, even if it's mentally.
Okay, so this draws me into a
I
debate.
don't remember the language. I'd
Right.
have to go back and look. But
This is a debate I've heard Christians having, and politically I land on one side, but I'm curious your thoughts on it. And that is same-sex desire sinful inherently?
okay.
Right? At what point does same-sex desire reflect
Oh, that is a
a
very good
dysfunctional
question in
belief, a
light
broken
of this.
heart, right? And just the act of being tempted, we would say being tempted isn't a sin.
That's correct.
But when you draw it in, and Christians are debating this because Christians don't know what to do with same-sex kids with same-sex desire, growing up in church saying, I want to be a Christian, but I have this about me. Is it inherent? That's
Yeah.
the narrative, right?
Yeah.
This is who
Yeah.
you are, like we were talking about before. There's a strong part of Christianity that says you can be free. You can be delivered. God can transform your heart.
You're going to smile at my response because it's totally inconsistent with what I just said to you. And I've never put that topic in this conversation.
Okay.
Because my original developed idea on that thing is I agreed with Lewis that God forbids the action, which would include the deliberate meditation on whether it's same sexual desire or heterosexual desire. The deliberation of thought on it is also sinful.
Yeah.
And so I put that in the action category. But I've always thought what God says, if you were a person that suffered from that God's called you is to resist living in it. And
Right.
and I put it in this 80-20 thing where I personally believe.
But wait. You wouldn't exclude them from Jesus' requirements to not lust.
No, they're included in that, whether
Okay.
it's homo or hetero.
So living in it means both the
mentally-
acts of being in homosexual relationships, but also
And
mentally.
the mental engagement.
Right.
So if you foster it, and
Yeah.
I think what he's saying to men with a woman is if you foster out of your desire a taking of her in your mind in some way, licitly, or, there's going to be some line that it's not wrong to look at someone and think they're really attractive, and even to look twice, so to speak.
Yeah.
But where it becomes wrong is, boy, it's difficult to discern.
God convicts. The Holy Spirit has
He
something to
does,
say
I
about
think
that.
so.
Yeah.
And whether that's same sex or heterosex, I think the same line is, the same issue applies to both.
Yeah, and I think that the reality of, because anybody can be tempted by same-sex desire. I would say that. I don't think it's unique to some group of people. But some people, that temptation is persistent. It seems
I
to have
agree
a
with
hold
that.
on them.
And sometimes there are reasons beyond something bad may have happened to them. I
Right,
think
but
there
I
are
think there
chemical
is-
and biological things that may tend towards that temptation being stronger for some people.
Interesting. My take on it is it's a signal that something in your heart has been broken by somebody.
I agree with that too,
And
but
there's-
I
there's
also
something
think you
God
can have
wants to do.
estrogen, testosterone issues that make you
Yeah.
vulnerable to that signal.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
So anyway, my answer outside of this emotion question is no, it's not wrong to have those thoughts come into your mind. Those what I wonder are those emotions or desires, but you say no to them. You
Right.
say no to them in the acts, and you say no to them in your thoughts,
I
just
remember-
like the hetero does.
I remember in college, somebody had come and taught the girls, the women in our college group separately. This is what you need to understand about men's sexual
Yeah,
desire, because
yeah.
they didn't know,
Yeah.
especially the girls growing up in school, in
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And I remember in this mixed company afterward, this girl who I think knew I would tell her flat out things, right? She says, Luke, how long does it take if a girl is dressed in a provocative way for your brain
How
to
long
start
does it take?
telling a story, right? Because that was what
Okay.
that was the verbiage she'd been given.
Yeah.
And I said 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And she was like, no.
I know.
She could not imagine it, right?
Yeah.
I think I might have been saying it long, right?
Yeah,
It might be
yeah.
1 second at times. Yeah.
Yeah.
But testosterone's a huge part of that too.
Yeah. This is a good conversation. We should have this again. We should talk about this a little more.
All right.
And develop it. Let's end with one fun thing, and then we'll make a little point from it. But before we were on air, we talked about pi. We do our testing 1, 2, 3 testing, and
Yeah.
said testing 3.14, and you began to rattle off. So what is pi? Let me ask this question: what is pi?
Besides the 50 digits or so I memorized in college.
Do you have all 50?
Well, I mean, the first 50, right? It goes on forever. But-
Yes. Well, pick a smaller number than 50 and rattle off.
All right.
So the question though is, what is pi?
Yeah.
And there are people. This is an answer. Go.
This is every nerdy middle school kid.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. 3.1415926535897932238462643383279
Yeah.
5, etc. Okay.
That's what we get the idea.
yeah. So
Are there any other
pi
ways
is actually in
to
the
answer it?
Bible.
I know
Slightly,
it is.
or just a little bit. I remember when I first
this
noticed
is where I
it.
was going to go.
Yeah. So it talks about the
Second
distance,
Chronicles.
the distance around a circle
Yeah.
compared to the distance
Tells
across
to
the
build
circle.
one of the baths in the temple. Is what it was. Instructions to build the baths this wide and this circumference.
Yeah.
And you know the dilemma there.
It's not accurate. It's not
not
exact.
pi.
Yeah.
It's
well,
not-
it says a 3.
It's 3 is the best answer you can get.
Yeah.
So, are there other answers to what the question? What is pi?
There are a myriad ways to measure pi.
Yeah.
So we would call them maybe proofs. They're not
Yeah.
really proofs, except that there are methods that continue on forever to
Yeah.
get closer and closer
Yeah.
to the number.
So your answer is one form, right? A long digit, and you're illustrating infinity.
And it's a number that,
3.14 is the most common answer.
that's the most useful one
The point I'm going to end up making, it is most useful for us
in our digital system.
in
yeah.
our digital, technologically driven world. That's the one that makes the most sense for us to say. And then I make the point, and we'll come back to it. The Bible says pi is 3. So what does that mean? And then there is one other
Well,
answer.
it means that it's not trying to be as accurate as we are.
That's where I'm going to get
Yeah.
to. The other answer that is clever is the formula. Right?
Okay.
You can't go
which
wrong.
formula do you mean?
Well, the circumference, not the one where he came up with it's pi is connected to. Oh no, that's Pythagoras theorem.
Pi is connected to the area and the circumference.
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
circumference
yeah,
is
yeah.
the simplest.
Yeah. That's the one I was going for.
But the formula, I mean,
two circumference is 2 pi r. Is that what it is?
yeah, right.
yeah.
Or pi times the diameter, right?
Yeah.
The method I think that's the most ancient, and I could definitely be wrong on this, but is simply to say, well, we start with a square with 4 sides.
Yes, that's where I was
Right,
saying.
and then you make it 6, and then you make it 8, and
Yeah.
you increase the number of little triangles that are collected around.
unto an infinite amount.
Yeah, and you can form an equation, and then you
Yeah.
limit that variable out to infinity.
Yes. So, but the point is, there's an equation, as an answer.
That's right.
Well, anyway, the reason I love this question is I work hard in different settings to help people understand what the Bible is saying and isn't saying.
And what it's trying to say.
What its intention
and it's not even trying
is.
to.
It's not trying to say pie. I've had people get quite flummoxed, when I say the Bible says pi 3 because they know it's not.
Right.
And
well, rounded to the nearest whole number, it is 3.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Which
was
there has been
perfectly sufficient for their
exegetical
purposes.
attempts to make that diameter and circumference inside rims.
Oh, goodness.
This is, but none of them work. It's because they know the thickness of it from other passages.
Oh, okay.
It's hilarious. But what I think is interesting and what I think is corrective for our way of thinking about the Bible, because we live in such a technological age, we look for a level of precision that wasn't a part of the life of the ancient world.
Right. That's right.
Which is interesting because they build pyramids with a precision and they drop stones in the ground to settle with a precision that the east stars can be seen through them. And we don't know how they did that one, right? But in any case, and so I just find it interesting, and I like these kinds of illustrations, and just because we mentioned earlier, because the Bible is not saying pi is 3. Mm-hmm. It's not saying it in the way we feel comfortable with it. It is, and so the great word is, it's an accommodation. It's when God spoke, he came into a setting, spoke a word, and let a lot of things stand in the setting that he wasn't interested in that moment.
Right.
And you can't draw conclusions based on what he did or didn't include.
Well, and I think numbers is a unique topic in the Bible because numbers have meaning beyond their precise
additional
value.
meanings.
Like there's numerological.
Right.
I've dabbled in it a little bit. I know it goes way too deep and becomes not useful in my view.
Yeah,
but
I'm in agreement.
I'll dabble in one actually because we got a little bit of time. We were talking about this at small group.
Okay, just as long as you're taking, I've got
timer.
good control of this thing today.
I got the timer. We were talking about a few key numbers. One of them is 12.
Yep.
Repeats in the Bible.
Yep.
Obviously, the 12 tribes represent the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus had 12 apostles. But he also didn't just train and send out 12. He sent out 72.
That's another number.
And that number also occurs repeatedly in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. That there's
The
72 people who come with Jacob to go to Israel.
That's true.
And there's 72 elders. There's 72 descendants of Noah that we think became the nations. And you get into the book of Enoch a little bit there. But the idea of 72 representing the nations and the 12 representing Israel shows the story that God's telling with these numbers.
Yeah.
Even when Jesus in his ministry is telling this story. He's saying, look, we start with the 12.
decisions. I'm going to call you.
That's right. And we start with the 12. We start with Israel.
Yeah.
But then we go to the nations.
Yeah.
And so he's training them not just to look in, but to look out and conquer.
Yeah.
Take dominion of the whole world.
One of my interesting things, I should do this. I should make a book recommendation, River of Doubt. But this is to be read by an adult who is firm in their faith. The author, man, I can't think of his name right now. It's a 3-name one. River of Doubt is a great one, set in the Pacific Northwest. And it's this guy who goes fishing, and he learns about life through fishing. But in the first chapter, he grows up fishing, and his parents, and they love to fish. And the Bible, the guy's wondering about God. The book is about God, really.
Okay.
But he goes places I can't go. But in any case, 153 fish. He's got to have written a whole chapter about the 153 fish the net that's exploding.
And is this after Jesus' resurrection?
No, this is in the before.
Okay.
In the before.
Because I remember it happens twice.
There's 2 times that they catch a big thing, yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, 153 fish. And he made a good point that I thought was fair. He goes, what a precise number. And it doesn't appear anywhere else. It's not one of these mystical, mysterious numbers.
Right.
It's 153 fish. Because by golly, fishermen, man,
they're measuring, man.
They are, man. They want to know how big. It's 19 inches. They might stretch things, but their buddy's going to correct them. And this was 153.
Peter probably had a personal record, and now he's like, "This is my record now. I don't care if Jesus did it."
That's the point. And
it's
I
new
thought
PR.
That was a clever take on 153, and it may have some real validity. Well,
That's funny.
you've been listening to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke. If you enjoyed the episode or found something to reconsider or think through, a topic that was piqued your interest, share it with a friend. Start a good conversation, and remember to dig a little deeper and think again. We'll see you next time.